Good afternoon, everyone. This is First Legion Painting, and we are going to be doing an unboxing of the Dark Angels Contemptor Dreadnought. You can see a picture of it painted in the top right corner of the stream. I've already taken the merchandise out of the box, so that way you guys don't have to see me cutting through plastic. So let's go ahead and dive in. So the first piece that I want to look at today is the chassis of this miniature. There's so many good things to say about it. I can't think enough about how much thought and effort went into each individual portion of this model. You can see all the love and depth that they went to. There's a couple things that I want to call out in particular. Let's look at the chains on this miniature. You can kind of see this really neat kind of chained in feature that it's got going on, which really kind of is a unique thing that we haven't seen on a Dark Angels miniature up until this point. Chains haven't really been part of their shtick, so it's kind of cool to see some additional flair going on. We definitely see that raised surface. You can also note the panel that is fastened, or that the chain is fastened to, so it's not kind of loose. You'll have to paint that silver. That'll give it a little bit of breakup from the black lacquer. As some of you guys may know, the Dark Angels in the Horus Heresy are painted black and not green like they are in standard Warhammer. And we can kind of see a lot more going on here. We go definitely to the angel wings. We can see these here, very standard operating procedure for Dark Angels. Those angel wings are kind of on everything, which is, it's going to have the continuity. But what I do love, maybe because of its absurdity, but also because of the, the 40K nature of things, is the candles on the chest of this model is just amazing. You can kind of see the drip where the candle has melted down onto the armor. It's just incredible on both sides. You can see that drip, and it's just fantastic. And that takes us all the way to the top, where we've kind of got the standard Terminator theme that we see across the board for Dark Angels. I've heard them referred to as bunny ears, which is kind of interesting. And we can see the Gothic Baroque style crown almost with a skull in it. Definitely very, very beautiful. And the last thing is, and this is going to be something I'm going to go over quite a bit in this video, is the metal trim. Now, the metal trim is very similar to the Mark II Crusader pattern power armor. Now, this is something that Forgeworld kind of came out and said that Dark Angels really liked that specific flavor of power armor, and a lot of their miniatures are outfitted in something similar to that. And we kind of see that here across the board with this miniature, and I'll kind of go through each piece that has that. So let's go ahead and move on to the next portion of the miniature. And this is kind of a two-part piece. So we have the underbelly that would go underneath the flare out of the carapace. So right here, this is where this will go. It'll kind of slide in underneath it and give the range of motion for the top half of the dreadnought. And this one even has that same kind of flared out trim that we see on the Mark II shoulder pads. But what I really like about this is it kind of has a couple options that you can play with, right? So you've got this indent, you've got this this indentation, and you could do a couple things with it. You could go for kind of like a stained glass approach. I don't know how effective that would be because of it being kind of obscured by the upper portion of the torso, but you can also go for something similar to the Chaos Knights, where there's kind of like a power plant here type of thing. As is their lower torso on the Chaos Knight, it kind of has this fire coming out of it, and that's an option as well. So that, you definitely got some play here, and it kind of continues to have that intense modularity that you can kind of really do whatever pose you want, even into something, kind of silly. And we can kind of see the rest of the hydraulic housing and some of the coils, as is pretty standard for Space Marine equipment. And then that takes us to the hip style joint for the crotch plate, as it were. We kind of start to see more of this Baroque kind of Gothic style trim work, that works alongside the Crusade style. We've got that same, continuity that we'll kind of see across the rest of the miniature. Everything on the back is pretty standard. So let's take a look at the two leg pieces. These are the housings for the legs, for the leg armor, as it were. And what I really love about this is we still see that same Crusader pattern flare out. It's a little bit different than the way Mark III works. We kind of see the Mark III on the Death Guard Dreadnought. But for this, it's kind of got this unique flavor. But what I really like as far as painting goes is we have this very broad metal trim that goes down the middle. And what that does is it opens up a lot of painting opportunities to really accentuate and create a lot of contrast. So we could go real bright, kind of like a shining silver style on the trim here. And you can really darken into that middle point, get it nice and dark. You've got some rust effect options that you can really play with. As far as things goes, this gives you a lot of real estate to work with in those metallics, and it's just a beautiful miniature, to say the least. We've definitely got a lot of options here, so I think this is going to be something that's going to be great to paint. Also, as you can kind of see, barely in the miniature, the painted version that's on Forgeworld's website, is they went ahead and used this kind of halfway point to put in a checkered pattern, and that's definitely a pretty easy option that you can do with very little struggle because you're working on some really consistent flat surfaces. So I think this is something that'll be a lot of fun to play around with and to really customize to give it its own individual flair, which is something that I think is really important for Dark Angels miniatures. So let's move on now to the helm and the knee plates. So let's start with the knee plates because I find them so interesting. So one of the things that's really cool, as many of you guys may know, is the Dark Angels Primarch is Lionel Johnson. And we kind of start to see that here. We have this lion wielding a sword. It definitely has that, subtle connotation. Well, not so much subtle, but that, reference to the, the leader of the Dark Angels. We start to see that come out, and what I find significant is that they chose this as a non-interchangeable option. Every miniature will have this on it unless you want to use a different knee pad or you want to sculpt it off or scrape it off. It's going to be on the miniature, so it's kind of interesting to see on a Legion that is kind of considered to be pretty fractured as far as the Horus Heresy goes. So that's definitely an interesting move. And then we definitely see on this side, there's definitely a lot of options. As an example, in the painted version, we see some of their more esoteric references with the crossed keys. So you definitely have a lot of play that you can do as far as customizing. And this is definitely the size that you could fit a water slide transfer on. So there's definitely a lot of cool stuff that you can do. And then that'll take us to the helm. And the helm, I think, is just gorgeous. We definitely see kind of that medieval knight, very brutal, unforgiving style. You definitely see that brutality here. As far as the torso, it's kind of got a very angelic repose to it. But for this helm is brutal. This helm is, I'm here to get in your face and kill you type of thing. And that's definitely a really neat contrast that we see a lot of times with the Dark Angels. They have this monk aesthetic, and then on the other side they've got, Plasma and Deathwing and Dreadwing and so on and so forth. So it's really neat. I really enjoy the individuality, and we really continue to see this focus on the studs and the metal trim. This kind of permeates every portion of this model, which is great to have that consistency that, is sometimes missed or isn't really relevant or present on some of the other Contemptor chassis where it's very much just kind of a flat surface. And that'll take us to the feet. Feet, Not really much else to say. It's kind of interesting that it comes with two. I haven't built a lot of Contemptors from Forgeworld except for the Betrayal of Kauth models, so it's kind of maybe this is standard procedure. If it is, leave a comment. You know, it's good to know. You can definitely kind of tell based on the ball sizes, right and left, so on and so forth. So that's what that is. One of the good things, though, about this is it continues to have this layered metal plate, which I think is standard for Contemptors, but it will flow a little bit better with this one because of the Crusader style that we see as far as the layering of the plates goes. And I'll go into a little bit more detail on that on the next portion of the miniature. And then I'll take us to the shoulder pads. So the shoulder pads, like I said, has this same layering effect. And this layering effect is present and comes from the Crusader pattern legs. If you ever look at the miniature, instead of being kind of this flat plate that you see on the Mark IV Maximus pattern, this is a layering, a stacking of plates on top of each other to create this effect. And you know, this is really interesting because it kind of eliminates the options to really customize it. I mean, I guess you could probably make a kind of emblem work here, but it'll be a little bit more difficult. At least in the miniature from Forgeworld, they didn't really do anything with this, which I think is to be expected. So we really see this layering effect. You know, we see that here, and then we see it on the boots, and we're going to see that on other portions of this miniature. So it's really cool to see that kind of continuity. And I think this is standard, the boots being like this. I think this is for every Contemptor. But I think it's going to add a little bit more to the experience of the model with the way these layers work. And then I'll take us to the other shoulder pad. It's got the beautiful Dark Angels winged sword on it, which looks fantastic. It's a beautiful sculpt. I don't see any kind of damages. It's definitely got some gorgeous angles. That'll be a great time to paint. And then we continue to have this kind of flared out metal trim that's very much consistent across the model, and it's consistent with the Mark II pattern. So as far as theme goes, I believe Forgeworld has knocked this one out of the park. I feel like they had a vision that they wanted a Mark II Dreadnought, and this is what we got, which is great. You know, it looks fantastic. I enjoy the Mark IV Corvus, or not Corvus, but Maximus pattern, but I feel like it's so close to maybe Mark VII that we, you know, seeing the Mark II and the Mark III really be accentuated is really nice, and it kind of gives it some distinction from the regular base game. And here is the power housing unit. We can go ahead and see the power plant here, and as is been with the model, we can kind of see this continued trend with this trim work. It looks great, and it'll be a lot of fun to paint. It's very easy to kind of come in and do some edge highlighting with the metallics here. You know, it'll be very easy to kind of create that harsh or that high contrast with the really bright steels and the kind of rusted and the flat portion of it. So this will be a lot of fun. And then that'll take us to the hips for the legs. And as I've mentioned before, here we go again. We start to see this same layering effect, and it truly looks wonderful. You know, we can see this effect across the board with a miniature, and here it is now. I would recommend painting this stuff in pieces. I imagine you could probably assemble the legs and just knock them all out at once, but you definitely don't want to put the torso on top of this because it'll make getting to this portion of it a little bit challenging because of the way it sits on it. But you know, this looks lovely. It's definitely got some really great contrast. One thing to note though is this is kind of flat here, you know, so it's definitely not meant to be seen in relation to, can't really see it that well, but the outside portion, you know, is much more well defined, you know, but this flat hip joint, definitely not meant to be seen. As far as this goes though, it looks gorgeous. And the last part of this miniature is something that I'm really excited for. This is the two different options for the inner chest piece. As we can see here, you know, you've definitely got some different flair. For me, though, I'm really leaning towards the sword, and one of the reasons for that is, as you can kind of see in the Forgeworld version, it kind of starts to lose some of its threat, some of the menace that comes with it when you go with the kind of full angel. I feel like the sword kind of gives it back some of that, you know, it's definitely here to kill you. It's not here to convert. It's here to kill. You know, and that's really cool. That it gives us those options. What I find really interesting is that this really gives you a reason to buy two of these dreadnoughts. You know, so that way you can have one of each. I'm sure you can magnetize, but where's the fun in that, right? So I'm very excited to do this. I may end up magnetizing it, but I'm definitely going to be going with the sword. You know, we can definitely see some of the beauty that comes along with this. You know, the sword is great. It's got this, you know, whirling script work that runs down it. You know, this paper trail that kind of covers the whole miniature top to bottom, with that sword veiled underneath it. But that isn't to say that the other one isn't gorgeous as well. You know, we still got that, you know, that dark watcher here with the sword. You know, that winged creature. You know, he looks wonderful, and he looks wonderful once he's painted. You know, it's definitely interesting to see they went with a white. But I'm sure that was just to kind of contrast with the red trim that they went with, but that's to be expected. As far as this goes, it looks wonderful. Now that takes us next to our weapons of choice for this dreadnought, and we had to go with the plasma cannon. You can't go wrong with plasma and with Dark Angels. We just had to go with the plasma cannon. It looks wonderful. This is definitely one of the older kits, though. It's got a little bit more of the oily finish to it that I tend to run into on some of the older miniatures. Some of the new stuff, you don't even need to really spend a lot of time cleaning it. It's very much kind of pull it out the box and have some fun. But this one definitely is a little oily. As far as this goes, though, it's kind of, you know, the opposite of what you would expect as far as like the way the plasma cannons would work. We typically have the, I believe this is a sight here. We have this on the bottom. You know, when I first looked at it, I was like, is it upside down? And I was like, no, it's actually this way is how it goes. You know, even though it's got all the equipment on the bottom here, this is how it goes. And I'm super excited for how large the plasma coils are. It's going to be a lot of fun to really kind of blow up and, you know, really build that bright, you know, Sun Fury style burn. So this is going to be a lot of fun. As far as the weapon mounts go, you know, obviously this is, you know, we want to look at magnetizing here. I've seen a lot of people do it here as well on this point, but I don't think it's necessary. I think right here is plenty, and then you can just kind of pull, you know, very literally pull the gun off and take it off. Say the dreadnought dies or, you know, wrecks, and you don't necessarily want to remove the whole miniature. You can just take the guns off, you know, and it's a little bit easier than worrying about, you know, the sizes of your magnets and so on and so forth. And then the next weapon we went with was the Chain Fist. There's a couple reasons I went with the Chain Fist over just the standard Plasma Power Fist. I do play a lot, so the utility of it was very important to me. But as far as this model goes, this is just gorgeous. You know, look at the head, the two skulls on basically the front of its knuckles, and then we've got this, you know, very easy going flat, you know, beautiful Power Fist housing. And just like in the Forgeworld paint job, unfortunately you can't see it in this one, but there's a full checkered pattern that they did going all the way around it. That's definitely going to be something I'm going to be replicating. It just looks so good, and it gives you a lot of different options as far as playing with it goes. I think it just really kind of redefines the miniature and gives it its own personal flair, which is really important. And as far as this goes, you know, this is one of those cool things that people may not know about the Contemptor or the Contemptor Dreadnoughts, is that they actually come with different Power Fist weapons as far as guns inside their Power Fist. So here we can see the Graviton gun, and then we can see the Melt-A-Gun. Now, our 40K friends may not be too aware of how the Graviton gun works in Horus Heresy, but it's basically a more certain way of killing a tank. And this one is very volatile, as everybody remembers from Melta. You know, you can just kind of either do nothing to it or blow it out of the sky. You know, it's kind of neither here nor there. And then here's that Chain Fist. That thing looks monstrous. You know, let's get some perspective here. You know, look at the Chain Fist compared to the actual chassis of the Dreadnought. You know, we've definitely got a big thing here. You know, it's almost as it's nearly as wide as it is. You know, that's a heck of a sword to have on the end of a Power Fist. So it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm definitely kind of open in regards to which weapons I may use. Some people magnetize it, but that can get a little bit challenging depending on how you want to pose the fist, as far as that goes. So we'll kind of see how we want to go about that. And then last on this are the fingers here for the chain fist, and then also the weapon platforms for the two different guns. So as you can see here, this is actually the power housing unit for the graviton gun, and this is the power housing unit for the melta gun. So it's really cool that you kind of get some options as far as your customization for the power fist goes. And I believe it goes onto the back right here, and it'll kind of give it its own flair and dimension. So it'll be a lot of fun. As far as the whole miniature goes, I think it is a gorgeous sculpt. I think, like I said previously, Forgeworld came in with an idea, and that was that they wanted to make it a Dark Angels Mark II Dreadnought that was gothic, baroque, and just gorgeous. And I think they knocked it out of the park. I don't have too many bad things to say about this. Some people weren't too happy about the candles, but I think the candles work really well with the theme of this kind of thing, where these guys are ancient. These dreadnoughts are old in comparison to the other Space Marine legions. We're talking about the first. We're not talking about Alpha Legion, so on and so forth. These guys have been around for a long time. So for them to be very static, very, they sit there and they guard, or X, Y, or Z. For them to have candles, that makes total sense to me. I definitely can see that for sure. Like I said earlier, the chains are kind of interesting. That seems to be kind of a new flair that I haven't seen previously. But as far as the Mark II goes, we start to see that, really across the board, on these miniatures. We start to see it everywhere. And here we'll kind of, zoom or focus a little bit more on that. We have all of this stuff that just screams Mark II, and it's very interesting to see that, all of these parts have something Mark II related on them. We see it here, this guy, it's got it on the, on the trim here, definitely all over the place. So it's definitely pretty awesome to see that uniformity across the miniature. So I plan on getting this painted, if not this coming week, the week after. We still got a little bit of stuff we got to clean up like here, and we still got to send it through the wash. But this is definitely going to be a wonderful time. It's going to be a great miniature to get painted. I'm super excited. And if you guys want to see more content like this, please like and subscribe. I stream on Twitch Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday from 11 to 5. You guys can find me there at First Legion Painting. So thank you very much for watching the video, and I hope you guys have a wonderful night.